Pop quiz. If you're an armor-wearing druid, which one of these 3 pairs of boots gives you the most armor? In fact, if you make one of the most common choices on the druid tree, the answer is the pure energy shield boots. This is because of the iron slippers notable, which gives 3 to your armor for every 1 energy shield on your equipped boots. As a consequence, no armor-wearing druid should be wearing armor boots, because you simply get more armor from ES boots than from armor boots. Iron Slippers isn't the only defensive notable that works this way, nor is it the most egregious, that being either Subterfuge Mask or Spectral Ward. These notables all force players into ignoring certain base types if they want to play well, including some base types that have really cool art, like the Death Mask. Look at it! Don't you want to wear that? I want to wear that. And GGG says I can't. And that loss of diversity in base types is why nerfing these types of defensive gain nodes is one of 10 tree changes I want in 0.5. Pop quiz part 2. What's the rarest type of defense on the tree? This isn't a hard question, I'll spare you the music. It's percentage increased maximum life. There are only 3 nodes of it on the entire tree. They're here, here, and here. The warrior has no shortage of ways to turn down their maximum HP, though. Giant's Blood, the most famous keystone in the entire game, now installs a penalty against your maximum life. You might think that this scarcity of life is informed by some concern about life-based builds, life stackers running rampant in PoE 2. But that just simply isn't the case. If you go to PoE Ninja and you compare energy shield stackers to life stackers, people are able to accumulate massively more ES than life, between 2.5 and 4 times the amount of life that people are able to accumulate. Similarly, if you look at people's effective HP, the size of singular max hit that they're able to withstand, it's not warriors, but ritualists that dominate the top of the leaderboards. In 0.5, I want GGG to add more life on tree, and if they must add a downside, do it at the expense of block chance, so that way you can't accumulate a huge hit pool and block incoming hits. While we're talking about rare types of defense on the tree, one of my favorite stats, and one of the rarest, is stun recovery, which doesn't prevent stuns but lets you recover from them faster, so it's harder for you to be chain stunned. This is exceptionally rare on the tree. There are only about 9 total points of it. As someone who's played a lot of other ARPGs, most notably Diablo 2, where faster hit recovery is an incredibly prized stat, this makes me a bit sad. I wish that there were a bit more of stun recovery in Path of Exile 2, especially for classes like the Huntress, where getting stunned more but recovering more nimbly would be an important feature of thematic gameplay. While we're talking about the Huntress, her portion of the tree has some of the worst, clunkiest damage nodes. I'm talking about these ones, where you get projectile damage if you've dealt a melee hit, or melee damage if you've dealt a projectile hit. These are intended to incentivize a sort of versatile gameplay, but they've failed in that task. They're utilized by less than 0.05% of all players. Streamlining these nodes, making them apply a flat bonus to all versatile weapons, would be a big boon to spear leveling, which, as we all learned when 0.2 launched, is not the most comfortable at low levels. To be clear, versatile is a new keyword that I'm proposing, meaning a weapon that can be both wielded in melee combat as well as used as a projectile. The only thing besides spears that meets this description is axes, and that means that I'm inviting axe players, when the Marauder eventually joins us in PoE 2, to play on the Huntress tree. However, this type of weapon-based damage is not unique to this suggestion. We already have nodes that give us bonuses to two-handed weapons, to one-handed weapons, to projectile weapons, and to dual-wielded weapons. So this would just be a continuation of that design language on the tree. And that's why GGG should declunk spear damage in 0.5. Speaking of declunking combat, in the lead-up to 0.3, Jonathan said this.
Next up, let's talk about accuracy. Accuracy was always intended to be something that warriors didn't need to care about very much so long as they're in close combat. But unfortunately, that's not currently the case.
You're right about that, Jonathan. So, did you fix it?
Warriors shouldn't require any accuracy investment in order to hit with close-range attacks now.
That's great news, Jonathan. Thanks. But I can still take Resolute technique if I want to be extra sure, right? Oh! Oh, you killed Resolute technique. Oh. Revert Resolute technique in 0.5. So far, we've spent the majority of this video on the bottom half of the tree, so let's take a quick visit to the top and talk about Sorceress gameplay. As everyone watching this video knows, in the endgame, elemental spells are among the most dominant builds at clearing content, with cast on crit and spark-based builds being at the absolute top of the meta. What everyone watching also knows is that if you want to level a spellcaster of any kind, you don't do it by using Spark and Flame Wall. You do it by using Essence Drain and Contagion. The reason for this is really simple. The synergy between Essence Drain and Contagion is always available, whereas the most powerful variants of elemental spells are only available while you have active infusions, which are awkward to generate and to maintain during early portions of the campaign. For example, if you want to generate cold infusions to empower your sparks at low levels, you probably want to do so by using Frostbomb. But Frostbomb only creates one infusion and has a long activation window. So what you really want to do is you want to allocate it with this support, and then you want to increase the limit by using the combination of Overabundance and Secrets of the Orb, and then you'll be able to generate 3 infusions, and then you can consume those 3 infusions in order to be able to cast Spark, and at this point, just play Essence Drain Contagion. One easy way to improve the leveling experience for elemental spellcasters would be to make it slightly easier to both access and maintain elemental infusions early on in the leveling process. If you're looking for a place to do this on the tree, I think that these penetration nodes could be moved to some other portion of the tree. The sorceress has no lack of options to be able to penetrate elemental resistances that enemies have, having ready access to both elemental weakness as well as various sources of exposure and ample penetration later on in the tree. All of those options combined means that moving these nodes won't hurt Sorceress players very much at all. Replacing these nodes with something like % chance to not consume infusions would do a lot in order to make things like Infused Spark and Infused Fireball better options earlier on in leveling. Even if this isn't the exact solution that's implemented, I want something to help elemental spells during leveling in 0.5. While we're on the topic of fiddly adjustments to leveling builds, let's talk about an adjustment to another leveling build, one particularly close to my heart. Grenades. Unlike bow-based builds, which got a lot of updates in the way that their projectiles scale in 0.4, crossbows were left mostly unaddressed. If you compare the ways that bows and crossbows can scale their projectile counts, there's actually a mechanism in PoE2 that I'd like to see a bit more of on the tree, that being % chance for grenades to activate twice. The node I'd like to see replaced in order to achieve that is this one, Cluster Bombs, which is both ridiculously OP and ridiculously frustrating to use. A relatively simple rework to that node would not only smooth out grenade leveling, but help to separate the playstyle identities of bows and crossbows, where crossbows scale by having grenades activate multiple times, and bows scale by having multiple arrows. Because the average game knowledge and systems design awareness of my YouTube viewers is exceptionally high, I expect there to be a couple of questions about the implementation of this proposed change. So let's deal with the 2 that I expect one at a time. The first is why this number is 35. The first half of the argument goes like this. 35 is approximately the same value as moving from a third projectile to a fourth, which is the typical value of this node during the extant leveling process. However, 35 also adds together with 15% from the repeating explosives node that I showed earlier, bringing your total to 50% on tree. Together with an existing Desecration and hopefully a future special rune, you could reach 100% chance to activate twice, which would be a really satisfying and clean number, as well as echoing some design common to spellcasters in PoE, where nodes like Psychic Fragmentation, together with Desecrations and special runes, can equal a 100% chance for spells to fire 2 additional projectiles. The second question I expect you to be asking is how this interacts with the limit for Gas Grenade, where ordinarily you can have up to 6 gas clouds active at one time. Right now, as it currently stands, you can have 1 base grenade from the skill itself, 2 more from multi-shot support, an additional 1 from the Bombard crossbow, an additional 1 from being a Deadeye, and get your 6th from Cluster Bombs. And with the removal of Cluster Bombs, you'd no longer be able to reach that 6. My proposal to fix this is to replace quality on grenade skills, which currently gives a minuscule and frankly useless amount of cooldown reduction, with surpassing chance to fire an additional projectile, such that if you go over into the Ranger tree and take those surpassing chance to fire projectile nodes, you can now reach 6 once again. Alright, that was really long-winded. Let's do some quick hitters before we move on to my final pièce de résistance magnum opus feedback. There isn't a good way to convert lightning damage to fire damage, and it'd be cool to add a keystone to the ranger portion of the tree, so I can light my gas arrows on fire using my lightning arrows, or light my oil ground on fire using my galvanic shards. Another quick hit is that I appreciate that there's different art for damage and penetration nodes on the tree, where fire damage and fire penetration have different icons, and cold damage and cold penetration have different icons. But could we carry through the theme and have lightning damage and lightning penetration have different icons, please? You're mixing up the matched sets. And now, at the end of the video, my magnum opus. My greatest critique, my last and final opinion, the culmination of all of my knowledge in Path of Exile 2. Is that the flare node doesn't have the gain tooltip? Fucking unplayable.